So let's just step back for a moment and ask what might be the biggest question of all. What does it actually mean for anything to be, rather than not be?
It's the question that really kicks off all of Western philosophy, and that's what we're going to try and untangle today. We're tracing this great idea of being from the very beginning right through to modern thought, using this essay as our guide.
Yeah, our mission is to really distill how these huge concepts, existence, essence, change all hang together to form a picture of reality. And because this idea is so massive, spanning millennia, we're using Google's Notebook LM to power our analysis. You are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation for dynamic essay analysis. It lets us synthesize these ideas and hopefully give you the clearest path through them.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. In classical metaphysics, when they talk about being, they're talking about two things at once.
Right.
First, there's just existence, the pure fact that something is. And second, there's its essence, the what it is, its nature, its definition.
And that split between the that and the what immediately gets you to the most important distinction in this entire conversation.
Contingent versus necessary being.
Exactly.
Almost everything is a contingent being. I mean, this desk, this microphone, even us. We have an essence, a whatness. But our existence isn't guaranteed. It depends on other things. We could just as easily not exist.
But a necessary being is the complete opposite of that. It's a being whose very essence is to exist. It simply cannot not be.
And that concept, that anchor point, becomes the center of gravity for defining reality for centuries.
So let's start where that search began, with Plato. For him, being is all about transcendence.
Well, Plato had a real problem with the world we see around us. It's always changing, decaying. You can't trust your senses.
So how can you have any stable knowledge?
His answer was that you can't. Not here, anyway. True being had to be somewhere else, in a higher, separate realm of what he called eternal, intelligible forms.
And at the very top of that hierarchy is the form of the good.
Right, and it's not just another form. It's the source of all the others. It's like the sun in his famous cave analogy. It's what makes everything else real and knowable.
So the physical things in our world, they aren't truly real then?
For Plato, no. Not in the fullest sense. They're like shadows. They only are because they imperfectly participate in those perfect forms. True being is always somewhere else.
But wait, doesn't that sort of devalue our actual lived experience from the get-go? If reality is somewhere else, what does that make our world?
That is the exact tension that Aristotle picks up on. He looks at Plato's whole system and essentially says, why are we looking for stability out there when we see order and purpose right here?
He brings being down to earth.
He brings it right down into concrete individual things. He says form and matter are united in this world. The reality of a tree is in the tree itself, not in some perfect treeness floating in another dimension.
And that's where purpose comes in. The telos.
Precisely. For Aristotle, to be is to be ordered toward an end. Think of an acorn. Its being isn't just that it's a nut. Its being is its entire journey, its potential to become a fully realized oak tree.
So existence is a process of fulfillment.
It's a journey from potentiality to actuality. That's where reality is grounded for him.
Okay, so you have Plato's stable, perfect, transcendent being, and Aristotle's dynamic, purposeful, immanent being. They seem to be in total opposition.
They are. And the challenge for thinkers for the next 1,000 years was, how do you reconcile them? How do you get eternal stability and real-world change into one coherent system?
Which brings us to the medieval bridge and Thomas Aquinas.
Aquinas takes on this monumental task. He wants to synthesize Greek philosophy with Christian theology, and his solution is brilliant. He reimagines being not as a static thing, but as an action.
The act of existence.
The act of existence, yes.
Yeah.
Act as ascendi. Think of it this way. If an essence is a blueprint for a house, what it is, then the act of existence is the actual construction. It's the dynamic power that makes the blueprint a reality.
So everything that exists has both. A blueprint and the power that built it.
Exactly. Essence limits existence, and existence actualizes essence. And this is how he brings back the idea of a necessary being. God, for Aquinas, is the one being whose essence is existence.
There's no blueprint. God is pure act.
Pure act. And all of us, all contingent beings, we share in being through participation. We receive our existence from that source. It's a gift we hold.
It's a really comprehensive system. It connects Plato's stable forms, which are now ideas in the mind of God, with Aristotle's very real physical world.
It's an incredibly elegant solution, yeah.
Okay, this is a huge idea. And before we get into how modern philosophy basically fractured this elegant solution, let's take a moment. The scope of this essay just shows how foundational these concepts are. You can find more comprehensive AI analysis, summaries, and critiques inspiring reflection and rational thought on our YouTube channel, Mindful Moments. All right, so after that incredible medieval synthesis, the modern era starts to shift focus. Metaphysics becomes less about cosmology and more about, well, us.
It becomes about knowledge, epistemology. The big question shifts from what is real to what can we know is real. That focus on the limits of the human mind starts to erode that classical confidence.
And then we get to the 20th century and a philosopher who just turns the whole table over, Martin Heidegger.
His critique is just stunning. He basically argues that for 2,000 years, all of Western philosophy had completely forgotten the question of being.
I mean, that's a wild claim. How could they forget the main question?
Well, he says they got so obsessed with beings, individual things that exist, like substances or God or minds, that they stopped asking about being itself, that background condition that allows anything to show up in the first place.
Okay, so if the whole tradition is wrong, what's his solution? Where do you start over?
You start with us. You have to start with the one being that actually asks this question. You start with Dasein.
Which is often translated as human existence, but that doesn't quite capture it, does it?
Not at all. Dasein means being there. It's the being for whom its own being is an issue. We're the only creatures who don't just exist, but we care that we exist. We know we're going to die, and we grapple with what it all means.
So the whole project gets inverted. Instead of starting with objective reality, you start with the subjective, anxious, time-bound experience of being human.
Yes. It takes the conversation away from universal definitions and plants it right in our own finite lives. That's the only authentic place to begin for Heidegger.
Which is a perfect transition to the practical framework Mortimer Adler gives us.
Right, because Adler includes the great idea of being as one of the 102 core concepts that define this whole Western conversation in his Syntopicon.
And what's so valuable for you, the learner, is that he doesn't just map the history, he gives you a toolkit for how to evaluate these massive competing theories yourself.
He says you should test any doctrine of being against 4 criteria. Number 1 is coherence. Is it logically consistent? Number 2, correspondence to experience. Does it actually match the world you see?
Then number 3, practical consequences. How does this belief affect how we act? And finally, number 4, moral implications.
And when you apply that framework, the big lesson that emerges is the need for balance. You can't just throw out Plato for Aristotle or vice versa.
You need both.
You need to balance that Platonic drive for transcendence, for stable truth, with the Aristotelian reality of immanence, the fact that we live and act and have purpose right here in this world.
It's a way for you to synthesize these ideas without getting completely lost. What an incredible journey. We went from Plato's forms in a transcendent realm to Aquinas' idea of being as an act flowing from God, and then all the way to Heidegger saying the only place to start is with our own human experience, with Dasein.
And it leaves you with a really provocative question. Given how much the definition of being has changed based on where philosophers started with matter or God or human consciousness, it makes you wonder, if existence really does pre-essence, how much of our own what it is are we still actively creating day by day?
Click the link on screen for the in-depth essay summary, subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.
See the many genre-based essay podcasts at Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.